so much. Hare Krishna. Jaya Baladeva Punjabi Hare Jaya Baladeva Punjabi Hare Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasoda Nandana Brajajana Rajana Jasoda Nandana Brajajana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Guru Premanande Jai. Thank you everyone for coming. Narayana Namaskritam Naram Sheva Narotamam Deva Sadasatam Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Lasha Praisha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavatsa Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai. Today we'll be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 10th Canto, Chapter 47, Verse 43. Is that up there? Yes. Okay. So it's a pretty long verse. We'll see how we do. Go through it. Mataji, do you feel comfortable chanting it, or it's a little difficult for you? Okay. That's all Krishna asked. Takim, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar either. Takim nisha smarati yashu tada priyadbir. Vrindavane kumuda kunda shashankaramye. Reme kwanashadana nupurarasa goshyam. Asmabir idita manogya kata kadachit. Takim nisha smarati yashu tada priyabir. Vrindavane Kumuda Kunda Shashankaramye. Reme Kwanash Chadana Nupura Rasa Goshtam. Asma Bir Idita Manogya Kata Kadachit. One more time. Takim Nisha Smarati Yasu Tada Priyabir. Vrindavane Kumuda Kunda Shashankaramye. Reme Kwanash Chadana Nupura Rasa Goshtam. Asma Bir Idita Manogya Kata Kadachit. Word for word, Taha, those, Kim, weather, Nishaha, nights, Smarati, he remembers, Yasu, in which, Tada, then, Priya Bihi, with his beloved girlfriends, Vrindavane, in the Vrindavan forest, Kumuda, because of the lotuses, Kunda, and jasmines, Shashanka, and because of the moon, Ramye, attractive, Reme, he enjoyed, Kwanat, jingling, Chadana Nupura, were the ankle bells, Rasa Goshtam, and the party of the Rasadans, Asmabihi, with us, Edita, glorified, Manogya, charming, Kataha, topics about whom, Kadachit, ever. Translation and purport by the disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Does he recall those nights in the Vrindavan forest, lovely with lotus jasmine and the bright moon? As we glorify his charming pastimes, he enjoyed with us his beloved girlfriends in the circle of the rasa dance, which resounded with the music of ankle bells. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti gives the following deep realization about this verse. Quote, the gopis knew that no place could be as beautiful as Vrindavan. Nowhere else in the universe could one find such a charming scene as the Vrindavan forest, which was scented with pious flowers and illumined by the full moon's light reflected from the serene waves of the sacred Jamuna River. No one loved Krishna as much as the gopis, and thus no one else could understand him as well. The gopis rendered intimate service to Krishna that only they could perfect. Thus the gopis were distraught to think that Lord Krishna was bereft of Vrindavan and bereft of their service. Free of all material lust, they were overwhelmed with disappointment because they could not give Krishna happiness by their loving service. They simply could not imagine Krishna enjoying anywhere else as he did in Vrindavan in their company. End quote. Amagyantamanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshumeletam Yena Tasma Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitan Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kapaturubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhattabinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai, thank you for coming. Before I continue, do you have Veda base on the verse? Okay, cool. I might ask you to look up another verse, if that's okay. So since you're in Veda base, but that'll be maybe 5 minutes into the discussion. So thank you for coming. As usual, I'll start today's class off by offering my gratitudes first to, Ramenta Mataji, whose nickname was Rama growing up. So she was destined to obviously come to the Krishna consciousness by Krishna's mercy, by Lord Rama's mercy. And thank you those online. And so we'll be, and also there's too many people to thank also. Recently, I'd like to thank Shankar Pandit Prabhu, the first Prabhupada disciple I met when I came to the temple. I just saw him recently. And he always inspires me with his Krishna consciousness and encouraged me to learn these Sanskrit verses. And of course, I can't forget my mother, my brother, His Grace Jai Jagannath Prabhu. So, as usual, I'll start off class with the quote that sets the theme of what we'll be discussing today. So, this quote, presumably by the name, is by a Greek philosopher, and his name is Marcus Aurelius. You've heard of him? Okay, yeah, I heard this side. So you might. Marcus Aurelius, and he says, quote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." End quote. Let me repeat that quote. "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." End quote. So in this regard, it should be pointed out that the gopis weren't concerned about public opinion. Public opinion is technically known as the status quo. In Krishna's opinion, it's technically known as the standard quest. The gopis were less concerned about the status quo and more concerned about the standard quest. And what is the standard quest? Gyane prayasam udapasya namanta eva jivanti sam mukalitam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shruti gatam tanuvam manobirye prayasho jita jitu apiyasi taistri lokam. Because the gopis always engage their tanu, or body, in serving Krishna, their vak, or voice, in glorifying Krishna, and their manobihi, their mind, in always thinking about Krishna, they were destined to see Krishna once again. Therefore it is said, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Dhyayato vishayam pumsa sangasteshu bhajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kama krodho bijayate krodha bhavati samoha samoha shiti vibramaha shiti bramsha buddhinasho buddhinasha pranashati. This is also the understanding of the Gita as well. Now it should be pointed out that not only were the gopis always thinking about Krishna, but as described in today's verse, they were wondering, what does Krishna think about us? The gopis never said, what does Kamsa think about us? What does Putana think about us? What does our family think about us? Or what do our friends think about us? No. What does Krishna think about us? So the lesson to be learned is this. Like the gopis, our only concern should be not what people think of us, but what does Almighty God think of us? Jeev Jago. Now, why is Krishna's opinion more important than public opinion? Because Atapumbir Dvija Shrestar Vanashram Vibhagashaha Swanutitasar Dharmasya Samsidir Haditoshanam. This is a very important verse from the Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 2, verse 13. Samsidir Haditoshanam. Regardless of one's occupation of life, the purpose of life is Samsidir Haditoshana. Samsidir means perfection, and Haditoshana means to please Hari. Toshana means Hari. Toshana means to please, and Hari is another name for Krishna that means he who removes all obstacles to spiritual progress. Actually, only Krishna can remove our obstacles to spiritual progress. This is precisely why his opinion is more important than anyone else, because he's the one who removes our obstacles. Just like, for example, if you're living on the street, what's your main obstacle? Hunger, homelessness, poverty, right? So whose opinion is more important? The other bums living in the street? No, you're not going to seek their advice, their opinion. You're going to seek the opinion of a rich donor in much the same way. Why? Because they can remove your obstacles, your hunger, your homelessness, and your poverty. So who's more rich than Krishna? Krishna has all opulence in full: riches, fame, beauty, knowledge, renunciation, and strength. So we seek Krishna's advice. We seek his opinion because Hari Toshana, he can remove our obstacles. So it's very simple. If you please a rich donor, then they're going to remove your obstacles. So this verse says Hari Toshana. Toshana means to please. And when we please Hari, he removes all our obstacles to spiritual progress. Now, it's often seen that sometimes we have to be aware of it as devotees. We can ask ourselves, do we also act as an instrument of Krishna's love and compassion? In other words, do we remove devotees' obstacles to spiritual progress, or do we put obstacles to devotees' spiritual progress? So that's a question you can ask for yourself. And there's many examples of devotees in the scriptures who put obstacles in people's progress. Before I continue with that, so Mataji, can you look up a verse for me? Let's see. So while you're looking for the verse, I'll continue, but the verse is from the third canto, chapter 29. So just go to the third canto, chapter 29. And so we'll be reading from verses 8 through 12. So before you read that, I'll continue a little bit. So third canto, chapter 29, verse 8 through 12. So in other words, so as mentioned before, we can ask ourselves, do we remove obstacles to devotees' progress, or do we put obstacles in devotees' progress? Like Indra, for example, it's described in one particular pastime in the fourth canto, I believe, where a great king in the incarnation of the Lord named Prithu Maharaj, he completed 99 horse sacrifices, and he was in the process of performing his 100th horse sacrifice. 29, chapter 29, 329. So Prithu Maharaj, he had completed 99 horse sacrifices, and he was in the process of performing his 100th. Now, it's described that King Indra, he got his position as king of heaven by performing 100 horse sacrifices. So whenever he saw somebody was going to potentially tie him or surpass his record, his world record or universal record, he always put obstacles to their progress. In much the same way, if we have this demoniac tendency, this envy, then we put obstacles to people's progress, whether spiritual progress or material progress. We see in the material world all the time at your job. People sab each other's work. My mother always told me how many people sabotage her one job after. But that's that's not only in the material world, that's also in the spiritual world or a spiritual institution, because we're all in the material world. So therefore, it's described in the Bhagavatam, the 3rd canto, chapter 29, that when we speak of devotees or devotion, it's described in this chapter that bhakti can be performed in the 3 modes of material nature. Meaning you could perform bhakti in the mode of ignorance, you could perform bhakti in the mode of passion, you could perform bhakti in the mode of goodness, or you could perform bhakti from the transcendental platform. And so these particular verses mention this. So, Mataji, would you mind getting the microphone? Thank you for helping me out. I appreciate that. So for references, we're reading from 3rd canto, chapter 29, verses 8 through 12. So these are very important verses in regards to not that it's just we're performing bhakti, but it could be performed in the most material nature. And so would you like to read those verses? Is that okay?
So I read in Abhisandhaya.
No, you could read just the English translation. That's okay.
Okay. Devotional service executed by a person who is envious, proud, violent, and angry, and who is a separatist is considered to be in the mode of darkness.
You can read to verse 12.
All the way through verse 12. Okay, I have to.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Okay. The worship of deities in the temple by a separatist with a motive for material enjoyment, fame or an opulence is devotion in the mode of passion. When a devotee worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead and offers the results of his activities in order to free himself from the inebriaties of fruitive activities, his devotion is in the mode of goodness. The manifestation of unadulterated devotional service is exhibited when one's mind is at once attracted to hearing the transcendental name and qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and who is residing in everyone's heart. Just as the water of the Ganges flows naturally down toward the ocean, such devotional ecstasy, uninterrupted by any material condition, flows towards the Supreme Lord.
Jai, thank you so much. And the first verse of that series from the 3rd canto, chapter 29, verse 8, it says, devotional service executed by one who is envious, proud, etc., is considered in the mode of darkness or in the mode of ignorance. And we see that Indra became transformed from the mode of goodness to the mode of ignorance suddenly in the Govardhan Leela pastime. When people took his advice, he was in the mode of goodness, right? In much the same way, when people take our advice, we're a good person, right? When people take somebody else's advice, we're not such a good person. Oh, your advice, you get pretty good advice, but I know somebody who gives way better advice than you. This is precisely what happened to Indra in the Govardhan Leela pastime. The residents of Vrindavan took his advice. Krishna gave them some alternative advice. They took that, and Indra, he went from the mode of goodness to the mode of ignorance in less than a split second. He summoned the clouds that are normally used during universal destruction. And he sent those clouds in that rain, that thunderstorm, to kill the residents of Vrindavan. So this is a very vivid example of how when we're attached, these series of verses attached to the modes of material nature, meaning attached to fame, money, power, position, that when things don't go our way, we use that power, we use that position, we use that the resources to do very demoniac things. So it describes how, as devotees, it's not just about chanting Hare Krishna. You have to be very serious, and that the last verse of that series says you have to be very serious in having a taste of hearing Krishna's glories. If we don't hear about Krishna, the Supreme Controller, then we'll certainly think we're Krishna, the Supreme Controller. Indra, he thought he was the Supreme Controller. Why? Because he thought he had control over who lives and who dies. But when he couldn't kill the residents of Vrindavan, he realized, I am not the Supreme Controller. In much the same way, as devotees, we may not try to kill others, but we do have a tendency to try to kill others' reputation. Just as Indra had no control over who lives and who dies, we have no control over whose reputation lives and whose reputation dies. Only Almighty God does. And this is what Krishna states in the Gita, chapter 10, verse 4 through 5. Krishna says, I am the creator of fame and infamy, and not the conditioned souls of this world who are entangled in Maya. So this is why Krishna's opinion is more important than anyone else's opinion. So the lesson is, read the books. Don't let anyone tell you what Krishna says. Read it for yourself. Be sincere about it. Study the books yourself. And so I could be wrong, but last time I checked, the Gita doesn't say he said. The Gita doesn't say she said. The Gita doesn't say they said. The Gita says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Krishna said. In other words, our only concern should be not what he said, not what she said, not what they said, but what does Krishna say? Why? Because Padam Brahma, Padam Dhamma, Pavitram, Padamam Bhavam Purusham, Shashvatam, Divyam Adidevam Ajavibhum, Ahustam Rishaya Sarve Devashir Naradistata, Asito Devalovyasa Swayam Shaiva Bravishime. So this is a nice verse by Arjuna in the Gita in chapter 10, verse 12 through 13 or 14. And after he was debating with Krishna, he considered his opinion more valuable than Krishna. But finally, when he couldn't solve his problems, how do we know we can't solve our problems? When we become angry, right? Angry. Anger is an indication that I'm not in control. or misery. Why? Because you're controlled by that anger, that misery. If we were the Supreme Controller, that means we will be happy all the time. Because everything will go our way. But the fact that we're not happy all the time, meaning we need some alternative advice. So in this way, Arjuna realized my opinion is useless because whatever my opinion I'm giving to myself, it's not bringing me any peace of mind, any solace. So therefore, he submitted to Krishna and he spoke this verse, Padam Brahma, Padam Dhamma, Pavitram. Krishna, you are pure. Can anyone say they're 100%, 100% pure? No, because we have this material body. So Krishna, and not only that, Krishna, you are divyam. You are transcendental to the molds of material nature. You are transcendental to time. Therefore, you know everything. And you're not your opinions, your judgment is not influenced by Maya, meaning envy, meaning pride, meaning greed. So often our decisions are influenced by our lust, right? We take two people, an old man and a beautiful woman, and we're supposed to distribute the money properly. Who are we going to give it to? Take the beautiful woman out. And that's what politicians do. So why? Because their decisions, their opinions are influenced by Maya, the temptation, the senses. So in this way, Arjuna says, my dear Krishna, your opinions are pure, pavitram. You're not contaminated by the lust of this world or the greed, because finally, you're the source of everything. So why do you need to be greedy? You can manifest money in a split second, so there's no need for you to be greedy. So your opinion is more valuable than anyone else, and you're divyam, transcendental. So to make this understanding very clear, Jaya Pataka, His Holiness Jaya Pataka Maharaj, who some devotee told me recently, I guess after he had the stroke, he was sitting down for several years, but some devotee yesterday told me that His Holiness Jaya Pataka Maharaj is now walking. So that's very good news, a miracle. But he says a very good analogy, and this analogy is described in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's book, Vaishnava K. What kind of Vaishnava are you? What kind of devotee are you? That's what it means. Are you a devotee in the mode of goodness, mode of ignorance, mode of passion, or transcendental? And of course, we fluctuate, no doubt. But His Holiness Jaya Baladeva wrote the commentary to this book by Bhaktisiddhanta. And in that commentary, he makes a very vivid, profound analogy. He says, just as a spider is never entangled in its web, so Krishna can never be entangled in the web of Maya. Because Daivihi Yesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. It comes from him. Because the web comes from the spider can never be entangled in the web. Have you ever seen a spider say, ooh, this web is too sticky, I'm stuck? No, because it's his own energy, he cannot be stuck in it. But because the web is not the fly or the bug's energy, he becomes entangled. In much the same way, we're entangled in the web of Maya, meaning our vision, Krishna's vision, is not entangled in sticky situations, like things that get us in sticky situations, like our lust, like our envy, like our greed. So his opinion, his advice is free from Maya's web because it comes from him. But as devotees, it doesn't matter, what type of devotee, generally speaking. And also, not only are we covered by Mahamaya, but sometimes Krishna will cover his devotees by Yoga Maya, meaning they may appear to be offensive, but they're not actually, because it was Krishna ordained by and sanctioned by Krishna. So the lesson is we have to be humble. Our opinion, we don't know everything. Only Krishna does. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani cha arjuna bhavishani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kashtana. In the Gita chapter 7, Krishna says, I know everything that has happened in the past, present, and future. But me, nobody knows. We cannot even see beyond our wall or what's behind us. So our knowledge is very limited. So what advice can we really give people? Is very limited. So those are some important points to consider. In this regard, here I wrote down a very important point in this in this regard. And it's a nice quote that says, we will worry less about what others think of us if we realized how seldom they do. End quote. I'll say it again. Quote, we will worry less about what others think of us if we realized how seldom they do. Quote. Now, generally speaking, I can speak for myself. We all have this tendency that when we think of others, it's because we need something. So devotional service means meaning that Krishna has given us everything. We really don't need much from people. And still, since we're under the most material nature, we do have that tendency that yes, if you have some money, before you had money, I didn't care about you, but now that you have some money, I need some, I think of you. Or if I need to use some facility, then, I think of you. But if I don't need it, I condemn you and I criticize you. And there's a nice pastime that describes that. So this is a materialistic mentality that could get us in a lot of trouble. And it's also, like I said, we all have a divine and demoniac nature, so we fluctuate between these mentalities. But devotional service is meant how we can improve our relationships with Krishna and with other devotees. And so there's a nice pastime in this regard. And so this pastime is described in the Krishna book, chapter 59. But of course, if you want to go to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the equivalent is the 10th canto, chapter 59 of the Bhagavatam. But Prabhupada wrote the Krishna book and he elaborated on these pastimes from the 10th canto. So, as mentioned before, this pastime is from the Krishna book, written by Srila Prabhupada, chapter 59. So once upon a time, there was a demon named Bhaumasura. And this demon, he had plundered the riches and the wealth of the demigods. And so it's described that this demon, he stole the earrings of Indra's mother. And so Indra's mother went up to him, my dear Indra, my Gucci, my Prada, my expensive. I knew I was going to get Krishna Archana Mataji to laugh. I lost my Gucci, my Prada, I don't know what the expensive earrings are, so heard those terms growing up. Gucci, Prada for women, they're like purses and stuff. I don't know any designer earrings. Oh, so I got confirmed that Gucci does earrings also. So anyways, Indra's mother's Gucci earrings were stolen by Balmasura. So she told Indra, get my earrings back. You better get my earrings back. They're very expensive. So in this way, Indra, when he approached a demon, he was scared. It's like approaching like an army of Arnold Schwarzenegger. You're gonna be scared. He could crush you to death. So this demon was very powerful. And Indra, he could understand that I do not have enough power to defeat this demon. And if I go back to my mother, she's gonna, disown me or whatever. So what did Indra do? He went to Krishna, the supreme controller. And so he humbly begged Krishna, my dear Krishna, my mother, her earrings were stolen. Her very expensive Gucci earrings were stolen by this demon. Balmasura, can you please, I'm begging for your mercy, can you please get them back? And so Krishna, he was very merciful to Indra. So he fought this demon, Balmasura defeated him, and he retrieved Indra's mother's earrings. So then it's described that this took place on planet Earth. And so when Indra asked Lord Krishna, he went back to the heavenly planet to wait until Krishna defeated this demon. So one day Krishna told his wife, Satyabhama, my dear Satyabhama, I have an errand to make. I just retrieved the earrings of Indra's mother's earrings. And I also remembered that she wanted a parijata flower. Well, these parijata flowers or trees, they can only be found in the heavenly kingdom, the luxurious gardens of Indra. So I'm on my way to the heavenly planets. Come with me so you could pick out a parijata tree. So it's described that Lord Krishna and Satyabhama took their enchanted chariot all the way to the heavenly planets, and they approached Indra. So Krishna says, here are the earrings of your mother, Indra. So Indra, he was so grateful. Thank you, Lord Krishna. And so in this way, Krishna, the next thing he asked, he told Satyabhama, there are the heavenly gardens of Indra. Pick out any parijata tree you want. So in this way, she picked out a tree, and they were going to bring it back to planet Earth. But Indra was thinking, Lord Krishna, he did not ask my permission to take the parijata tree. How dare he? This is my planet. This is my tree. This is my garden. He didn't ask my permission. How dare he? This was the preaching of his mind. There's a saying, if we don't preach to the mind, then the mind will preach to us. So these were the preachings of Indra's mind. So he was thinking like this. He was thinking. But in the Gita, what does Krishna say in the Gita? Bhaktaram yagya tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam gyatomam shantem rishati. Krishna says, Bhaktaram yagya tapasam, I am the enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities, and sarva loka maheshwaram, he is the proprietor of all the planets, including Indra's planet. He owns everything because everything comes from him, just like the spider web, right? The spider web comes from the spider. Similarly, this world of Maya comes from Krishna. That means he owns everything. So you cannot steal. How can Krishna steal from something he already owns? Mataji, can you steal your scarf that you already own? No, you can't steal it. So everything, and so when we think anything in this world is ours, then we'll get ourselves in a lot of trouble. So this reminds me of a quote by His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj. He gave sannyas initiation to Amala Bhakta Prabhu, who's now Amala Bhakta Maharaj. So you can look up the video on YouTube. And in this, he says a very nice statement. He says, Srila Prabhupada was once asked by a devotee for permission to renounce everything. Srila Prabhupada's response was, Krishna owns everything. So what do you have to renounce? The only thing you have to renounce is the misconception that you have something to renounce. So to the degree we think we have some wealth, then we'll become proud. To the degree we think we don't have any wealth, then to that degree we become envious. To the degree we realize that Krishna is Bhotaram Yagyatapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, then to that degree we're humble with everyone, whether we have more than people or whether we have less than people. And so Indra, in this way, Indra, he became very proud. So it's described that he battled Krishna. So he says, Krishna, how dare you take the Parijata tree without my permission? And so in this way, Indra battled Krishna. Of course, Krishna is the supreme controller. He defeated Indra. But Prabhupada says this is an interesting lesson. This is a very interesting lesson in our regards, because previously I was mentioning a quote. It says, we will worry less about what others think of us if we realize how seldom they do. Yeah, because, so sometimes this is also our nature too. The only way we think of others when we need something. In much the same way, because Indra needed something and he couldn't fulfill this purpose by himself, he went to Krishna. I need my mother's earrings. This demon is too powerful. So he was willing to be humble with Krishna, right? But as soon as his purpose was fulfilled, I don't need you, Krishna. Very arrogant. And so we see this is the mentality of the material world, conditioned souls. You know, we use people. There's a saying, love people, not things. Use things, not people. So we become very arrogant when we're in the top position. I don't need your help. But then what happens? When we need their help, we're very humble. And so this is what Srila Prabhupada is describing in this chapter. So Prabhupada writes in this chapter of the Krishna book, chapter 59 of the Krishna book, Prabhupada writes, quote, King Indra's behavior toward Krishna was not very much appreciated by great sages like Shukadeva Goswami. Out of his causeless mercy, Krishna had gone to the heavenly kingdom, Amaravati, to present King Indra with his mother's earrings, which had been lost to Bhaumasura. And Indra had been very glad to receive them. But when a Parijata tree from the heavenly kingdom was taken by Krishna, Indra had fought with him. This was self-interest on the part of Indra. He had offered his prayer, tipping down his head in humility to the lotus feet of Krishna. But as soon as his purpose had been served, he became a different creature. That is the way of the dealings of materialistic men. Materialistic men are always interested in their own profit. For this purpose, they can offer any kind of respect to anyone. But when their purpose, personal interest is over, they are no longer friends. This selfish nature is found not only among the richer class of men on this planet, but even in the personalities like Indra and other demigods. Too much wealth makes a man selfish. A selfish man is not prepared to take to Krishna consciousness and is condemned by great devotees like Shukadeva Goswami. In other words, possession of too many worldly riches is a disqualification for advancement in Krishna consciousness. End quote. So the lesson is, as Prabhupada is stating in this whole these series of paragraphs of this Indra pastime, is that this mentality of using others, oh, I condemn you and I condemn your society, but when I need it, I glorify you. This mentality is not pleasing to the Lord. And as mentioned before, atapum bir dvija shrestha varnashram vibhagashaha swanutitasa dharmasa samsiddhir hari toshanam. Only when we please the Lord, toshanam. Hari means one who removes obstacles. Well, he removes our obstacles. So if our mentality is to, you could say, if we're less concerned about tender love and more concerned about pre-tender love, then it's not that the Lord won't remove our obstacles. We're not removing our own obstacles to spiritual progress. And we see this causes very difficulties in relationships. I mean, imagine somebody says, is up front with you, I really don't like you. I like your money though, and I like your facilities. I want to use those. Would you be very pleased? So in much the same way, Krishna is not pleased with Indra or any devotee who uses Krishna himself or others in this way. And our obstacles won't be removed. And we'll continue in this Kali Yuga Netflix drama. We don't have to watch Netflix. We're already in Netflix and its soap operas. So this is, and finally, the last paragraph of this chapter, Srila Prabhupada writes, in other words, possession of too many worldly riches is a disqualification for advancement in Krishna consciousness. And so this reminds me of a very vivid quote, profound. It says, a person's possessions should be proportionate to the needs of his or her body, just as the shoe should fit the foot. And just like if you're, especially in the athlete, I mentioned this before, if you're an athlete like Michael Jordan, if you wear your shoes even an inch too big, then you run a risk of injuring your ankles and your Achilles heel. If you wear it even an inch too big, in much the same way, when we take more than what we need, then we'll injure our peace of mind, we'll injure our relationships, and we'll injure our bhakti ultimately. So this is the principle. Now, however, there's always rules and there's exceptions to the rules. Now, the rule is don't take more than what you need. And the exception to the rule is that what we need is relative to each person. Just like one time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, some people were criticizing him that, why are you opening so many temples? And so isn't this over endeavor? Or his disciples were wondering, doesn't the scripture say don't collect too many things, don't over accumulate? Well, Bhaktisiddhanta, he gave a very nice analogy, kind of similar to this one. And it's also described in the Bhagavatam many times. He says, well, one's necessities are proportionate to one's body. Just like a child, how tall is a child? Let's say a child is 3 feet tall. But if the child wears his father's shoes and clothes, that's too much. But if he wears his own clothes, that's enough. But if the father wears his own clothes, it's enough. Although it's too much for the child, it's not too much for the father, right? That's a very vivid analogy. So he says, to the degree we're able to control our mind and senses, to the degree we're devoted to Krishna, then you can have all the wealth in the world, like Ambarish Maharaj, like the Pandavas, like Prahlad Maharaj. You can have, but why doesn't Krishna give us all the wealth in the world? Because we know we'll go to Puerto Rico, we'll go to Australia, we'll go to, last place we'll go is probably India. So we'll take so many vacations, plunder so many money. That's why Krishna for most of us, doesn't give us so much wealth, because he knows we can't control our mind and senses. And so it's very simple. A baby's diet, it's like a baby's diet. You won't give a baby's diet an adult's diet. It's too much. But for an adult, the whole point is that we can't judge a book by its cover. Some devotees may have a lot of material opulences, but that's probably Krishna's blessing with that, because the reason he hasn't blessed us probably is because we can't handle so much opulences. And how do we know whether or not we can handle material opulence? Well, there's a pastime where there was in the Chaitanya Bhagavad, it's described that Lord Chaitanya and Mukunda Datta told Gadadhar Pandit about a great Vaishnava. Would you like to meet a great Vaishnava named Pandit Vidyanidhi? And so Gadadhar Pandit says, yeah, absolutely. So what's the indication of a Vaishnava? Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayujitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Gyanam Cha Ya Ahaitukam, something like that. It says, when one is connected to Krishna, what's the result? Gyan, knowledge, and Vairagya, renunciation. One is not attached to the things of this world. So this is Gadadhar's Pandit. Yes, a great Vaishnava, he must be renounced. So when they brought him to Pundarit Vidyanidhi, Gadadhar Pandit was completely bewildered. He had a very opulent house. He had many servants. He had, he bought his wife Gucci and Prada and Tommy Hilfiger and whatever. All the Sunil's like, yeah. He bought him all these name brand clothes. He had silk hair. He had many opulent china and furniture, silk furniture. And he was thinking, you got to be kidding me. Lord Chaitanya and Mukunda Datta, they've lost their damn mind. Can't be a elevated Vaishnava. But Mukunda Datta, he can understand that Gadadhar Pandit was criticizing Pundari Vidyan in his mind. There's a saying, the face is the index of the mind. Generally speaking, not always the case, but we usually understand a person what they're thinking based on their facial expression. So in this way, Mukunda Datta, he wanted to show the renunciation, the bhakti of Pundari Vidyanidhi. So he just quoted 2 verses from the Bhagavatam. And when Pundari Vidyanidhi, he heard these 2 verses from the Bhagavatam, he fell into ecstasy for 6 hours straight. And not only that, when he was in the frenzy of ecstasy, he destroyed everything in his house. He was like, boom, 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 because he was completely oblivious. He was intoxicated in Krishna Prema. Now, normally when I wear white, I don't like to eat the prasadam because you get one sabji on your shirt, it's over. Bleach won't help it. But we can see how detached Pundari Vidyanidhi was. When he heard the Bhagavatam, he destroyed everything in his house, meaning that Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Gyanam Chaya Ahaitukam. And he was completely in Vairagya, renunciation. He cared for nothing in this world. So that's the test of an indication of that when Krishna could bless us with unlimited opulences, is when we hear the Bhagavatam, we fall into ecstasy for 6 hours. So we have a long way to go. Usually when we hear it, it's like, fall asleep for 6 hours. So that's for most of us, including myself. So this is an indication, this is the criteria of whether or not you deserve unlimited wealth. If you don't like hearing Bhagavatam, Krishna's glories, then that probably means you're taking more than what you deserve or what you need. So that's the lesson we could take. So finally, on a scale of 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, how many of you, Prabhujis and Matajis, care about what others think about you? On a scale of 1 to 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you care about what others think of you? About what others think of you. Like Sunil, I don't like Sunil, he's just chanting all the time, he's not doing nothing. What people think of you, especially in criticism, if they criticize you, how much do you care about that from a scale of 1 to 10? Yeah, care about. No. Well, of course, previously we mentioned the different divisions of devotees. We quoted a verse from the Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 29, where it describes that devotional service could be performed in a mode of goodness, mode of ignorance, mode of passion. So naturally, there's different levels of devotees. So depending on your level, you may offer destructive criticism. Now, I'm not talking about constructive criticism. Yes, we should care about what devotees tell us, especially depending on their love for us and their devotion, their bhakti. But hypothetically speaking, let's take neophyte devotees or self-destructive devotees who criticize us. Like, we can't judge, but let's say that hypothetically speaking, there are. How much do you care about what they say about you? If they're, like, I don't like them, this and that. On a scale of 1 to 1, that's a 1, right? There is what? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To improve that form.
You actually reminded me of another point. So in case anyone didn't hear, Sunil's points was that on a scale of 1 to 10, if devotees find fault in you, how much do you care? He's like, well, if they see some fault in you, we should care. We should try to improve that, see what that fault is, right? Of course, yes, I agree with that. But that's another point I was going after, because I'm talking about, let's say hypothetically, see, not that we could judge anyone, but let's say Krishna has labeled somebody a neophyte devotee who's proud, envious, competitive. How much do we care about that? Finally, Bhaktisiddhanta says, he says in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, Volume 1, the chapter is entitled The Revolutionary Preacher of Truth. And he says, when Bhagavan is merciful to me, He will send unlimited people to speak sour words to me just to teach me tolerance. So actually, it doesn't matter what devotee is, elevated or not elevated. If they criticize us, constructive criticism or destructive criticism, it's actually a great blessing because you can't test your good qualities like tolerance unless you have opposition. So yes, everything is good, but that does not mean you have a fault. Just like Ramachandra Khan. If you ask Ramachandra Khan versus the prostitute, my dear Ramachandra Khan, what do you think of Haridas Thakur? Haridas Thakur, he's a charlatan. He's proud. He's chanting the holy name just for fame. Then you ask the prostitute, my dear prostitute, what do you think of Haridas Thakur? He's so kind. He's so compassionate. He's so loving. He's so caring. And so we see that where's Ramachandra's opinion of Haridas coming from? Material modes. Where's the prostitute's opinion coming from? Spiritual codes. So therefore we have two opinions, those under the influence of material modes and those under the influence of spiritual codes. And what does spiritual codes mean? Shravanam kirtanam Vishnu, smaranam padasevanam, archanam vandanam dasyam sakyam amanivedanam. How much are we following spiritual codes? How much are we hearing about Krishna? Or how much are we hearing about Netflix, soap operas, pornography? And then we want to give opinions and advice. So we can ask ourselves, not that we could criticize, but judge yourself. And we consider our advice so valuable. But ask yourself, what are you hearing on a daily basis? It says, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, just like we eat every day to remain spiritually strong. That's why we should hear Bhagavatam every day to remain spiritually strong. So if we're not doing that, and we consider our advice like so amazing, it's amazing. But that's a question we can ask ourselves. The whole point is that our opinions are usually influenced by material modes and not spiritual codes. Therefore, Rupa Goswami says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Siyat Krishna Nam Charitadi Sitapi Avidya Pito Patapta Rasanasya Narochi Kanu. He says that the holy name of Krishna, and Krishna is not alone, he's with his devotees like Haridas Thakur. The holy name of Krishna, his devotees, the name, the pastimes, the guna, the qualities, the leelas, etc., are all sweet, like sugar candy. But when we're infected by avidya, ignorance, and what does that mean? Material modes, envy, pride, envy, vengeance, then we cannot taste the sweetness of Krishna's holy names, or we cannot appreciate the sweetness of devotees like Haridas Thakur. So therefore, Buddha says something similar. He says, if a fool be associated with the wise man, even for all his life, he'll perceive the truth as little as a spoon perceives the taste of soup. If an intelligent man be associated with a wise man for 1 minute only, he'll perceive the truth as much as the tongue perceives the taste of soup. So what's the difference between a spoon and the tongue? A spoon is dead and the tongue is alive. So if we're spiritually dead with pride, envy, and vengeance, then we cannot see the greatness in anyone but ourselves. And if we're spiritually alive with humility, with appreciation, with forgiveness, then we can see the greatness within everyone but ourselves. And so therefore we see that devotees like Haridas Thakur, they're so humble. They say, or Krishnadas Kaviraj, famous verse, I am lower than a worm in stool. Anyone who utters my name becomes sinful. And Krishna will test you whether you actually believe that or not. If people ignore you and you criticize, then you really believe you're elevated. Now, why should we think we're lower than a worm in stool? Not in the sense of self-deprecation or self-depression, but if you think you're more qualified than others, then Krishna he could change it. It's very simple. What's that verse? Sarvapati virnir muktam tapada dvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchate. Krishna, it says, give up all these upadis, like upadi that I'm qualified. That's a title. I'm qualified, or I'm pure, or I'm renounced. Yeah, you're renounced, but for how long? As long as Krishna gives you his mercy. As soon as he withdraws that mercy, you cannot say, I'm renounced. You cannot say, I'm pure. Just like Sobari Muni, he criticized Garuda. It's a long story. He committed aparat. He was proud of his renunciation, his celibacy. Krishna withdrew his mercy, and he married 50 women, had many children. Of course, this isn't to criticize, obviously, household life, but the lesson is that how Krishna can humble us, meaning we shouldn't consider ourselves more qualified, more pure than others. And I'll just end with this. As I was mentioning to Mataji a couple of days ago, this is important, our mentality when we're approaching, Krishna or spiritual life. Now, when you apply for a job in the material world, what's the first thing the employer will ask you? What are your qualifications? And if we give them a spiritual answer, I have no qualifications, then what the hell are you doing here? In the material world, you're supposed to put yourself above others. But in spiritual life, it's the opposite. You're supposed to put yourself below others. When we approach the spiritual, we have that material mentality when we approach a spiritual life. I have more qualifications than others. Well, you can experiment with that mentality and see how it works for you. It probably won't work out too well because Krishna can humble anyone. He can humble all. So we always put ourselves below others, not in the sense of self-deprecation or depression, but as a humble servant and a servant. There's many things that can be said, but there was a few more things I wanted to be said, but while we have like 10 minutes left, anyone wanted to share anything else in regards to these points? Mother Krishna Archana, Sunil Madhava Prabhu. If not, then I'll share one last point, unless Majdi wants to say something. Let's see. One skill. What is that, 38? Do 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 do. Should I continue or yes? Okay. Sunil Madhava Prabhu.
It's interesting, you've been putting an emphasis on, from the devotional perspective, seeing oneself more in the lower position in comparison to others. So it's a certain mindset. In this particular purport, it's really rather fascinating that the mention is made that the gopis were distressed because they were thinking that Krishna would be bereft of their service. It's an interesting thought because then it means that the emphasis is on the service you can perform and feeling distressed that actually you can't perform it or Krishna won't be the recipient of your service. So that's a very unique perspective because generally the focus is maybe of what one can do, but not necessarily thinking that the other person is now going to be deprived of what one is offering. So I was just wanting to add that to your the emphasis you were putting on how one sees oneself in spiritual life.
Yeah, that's a very nice point because usually as devotees we say, I need Krishna's service. If we're sincere, I need Krishna's service to spiritually survive. But the gopis were like, and not in an arrogant way, Krishna needs our service. What will he do? and that's goes to the point of the pure love of the gopis, not that they're getting anything out of it, that they just want to give to Krishna selflessly. So, I'll try to connect this to the point I was already going to make. Krishna will test us how selfless we are. He tests us because we could say, and just like a teacher, a student, the teacher may ask the student, have you mastered your math and science? The student will say, yes, I have. Let me give you a test. So we may say, yes, I've mastered humility. I've mastered forgiveness. I've mastered tolerance. I mastered generosity. And but then Krishna will give you a test, meaning he'll put you in the circumstances where you're forced to be tolerant, you're forced to forgive, you're forced to be generous. And usually as conditioned souls, why do we keep taking birth? We keep failing the test. Oh, darn, I failed again. And so, but still, nevertheless, we try. So there's actually a story in this regard. So this is a very important story mentioned in chapter 89 of Krishna book. Long story short, once upon a time, there was a debate among great sages. Who is the supreme controller in the universe? Is it Brahma? Is it Shiva? Or is it Vishnu? Some said it was Brahma. Some said Shiva. Some said it was Vishnu. So they appointed a sage named Bhrigu Muni to test all three of them. Bhrigu Muni first tested Brahma by ignoring him. Now, it's described that Lord Brahma is Bhrigu Muni's father. Now, if your guru or your father walks into the room, you're not going to ignore them, right? No. So, but this is not the lesson of the story to test our gurus or our teachers. But it's described that Brahma became so angry at being ignored, in much the same way we become angry at being ignored, that he was going to curse Bhrigu Muni. But he decided, Bhrigu, you are my son, I will not curse you. So then Bhrigu Muni thought, you are not the supreme controller? Then he tested Lord Shiva. It's described that Lord Shiva is his brother because they both come from Brahma. Now, although the pictures of Lord Shiva on the internet are very beautiful, it's described that Lord Shiva, he covers his body in ashes from a crematorium of dead bodies. He has matted hair, dreadlocks, like Rasta. He wears skull bone and snake garlands. He has a scorpion belt and a loincloth. And if somebody walked in a room like that, we'll definitely call the National Guards, or security, definitely. But if you haven't seen your family member in a long time and you meet at the airport, what's the first thing you're going to do? Hug them. So it's described that Lord Shiva, he did not see Bhrigu Muni in a long time. He told Bhrigu Muni, my dear Lord Bhrigu Muni, I haven't seen you in a long time. Please give me a hug. In order to test whether Lord Shiva was in control, the supreme controller, Bhrigu Muni purposely insulted him. He said, yuck, Lord Shiva, you're disgusting. What's wrong with you? Cover your body in ashes from dead bodies? That's disgusting. You don't wash your hair. Please do not touch me. And so Lord Shiva became so angry at being insulted in much the same way we become angry at being insulted that he was going to kill him. And we see in the material world, people kill each other over just being criticized or insulted. We see and politicians do it secretly all the time. If somebody publicly criticizes them, they send out their secret ops, black ops to take them out. So that's why you shouldn't get involved in politics, unless you're willing to get taken out. So anyways, Bhrigu Muni thought, Lord Shiva, you're not the supreme controller. Then he went to go test Lord Vishnu. How did he test Lord Vishnu? While Lord Vishnu was lying on the lap of Lakshmi, his wife, Bhrigu Muni walked up to Lord Vishnu and kicked him in his chest. And Lord Vishnu, he did something that we wouldn't do. He started to glorify Bhrigu Muni. He says, my dear Bhrigu Muni, I hope my heart, thunder-like chest, didn't hurt your soft lotus feet. Great sages like you can purify even the places of pilgrimage. Please forgive me for not properly receiving you when you came into my home. How may I serve you? This response for Lord Vishnu actually brought tears to Bhrigu Muni's eyes. And he was thinking, Lord Vishnu, you are the supreme controller. Why? Because although Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are known all over the universe as great controllers, he saw that they were actually being controlled. What were they being controlled by? Anger and rage. Whereas Lord Vishnu was the controller of anger and rage. So in this material world, everyone is so proud, especially if they have a position. I'm in control. But if a beautiful lady or man walks by, they're in control. We may be proud. We may criticize others. I'm the leader. I'm in control. but then the next day we may ask, where's our leader? Where's our controller? They're controlled by a root canal. They're at the dentist. They'll be out for... Prabhupada gave this example, actually. Prabhupada gave this example. We become so proud that we're in control. We're controlled by a toothache. We're controlled by our diarrhea, our bowels. We're controlled by traffic. Anything could take us out. There's unlimited ways that we're not in control. So the moral of the story, there's many mores you could say, but there's a nice quote. It says, now this is the criteria of whether we truly care about what people think of us. We may put on a facade. I don't care about what other people think of me, but here's the criteria. It says, if somebody says something good about us, we feel good. If somebody says something bad about us, we feel bad. The question is, have we given the remote control of our happiness to someone else? So when we become angry, internally at least, because we put on a show that we're not sometimes, if we become angry and we feel this reaction internally, what are we saying? I have no control over my life. You have control over my life. You determine whether I'm happy or not happy. And this is the lesson we could take from Lord Vishnu, that our happiness shouldn't be dependent on how people treat us, but it shouldn't be dependent on good compliments, but good qualities like forgiveness and tolerance. Yasyasi Bhakti Bhagavati. There's one last analogy I'll share. So sometimes when people say, I don't care what people think about me. Really? You've been talking about how much you don't care what people don't think about you for the last 2 hours. Really? You know, so we see that. That's the tendency. I don't care what people think about it, but you describe people's faults for 2 hours. So what's the lesson? Here's a very nice analogy. Is it possible to read the Bhagavatam or chant your rounds on a roller coaster? No, it's impossible. In much the same way, Maya is always tempting us. Get on a roller coaster of the most material nature. The roller coasters of lust, we waste our time. The roller coaster of anger, we waste our time. And what is that? In criticizing others for hours. So what is the lesson? Stay grounded. Just like there's two people at the amusement park, the grounded workers and those who want to enjoy the ride. So if we want to enjoy this material world, we'll have a roller coaster of emotions. And so what's the lesson? Stay humble, stay grounded. Orva bahukari kohan shuna sarva loka, nama suche ganti padakante shloka, trinada pisuni chena, taror iva sahishnuna, amani namana dena, kirtaniya sadahari. If you only know any shloka, learn the shloka to remain grounded. Do not get on this roller coaster. Otherwise, you'll waste your time. You won't have any interest in chanting the holy name, reading the Bhagavatam. So you have to be humble, tolerant, forgiving, and offer respect to others like Lord Vishnu did without expecting respect in return. And so I'll end with this quote by Bhaktisiddhanta. One time a person came to Bhaktisiddhanta. His disciple said, Bhaktisiddhanta, Maharaj, I have no time to chant. I have no time to do service. So Bhaktisiddhanta says this. This is in the Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav. Bhaktisiddhanta says, he's describing basically the roller coaster of the modes, how we waste our time. He says, Bhaktisiddhanta says, it is not that chanting is taking away time from service, or that service is taking away time from chanting, but idle thoughts are devouring time meant for both. No doubt you are doing considerable service, but at the same time, so much prajalpa, so much idle gossiping is going on. Give this up, and then you'll be able to do service and chanting. So we can ask ourselves, if we don't have any interest in chanting and reading Bhagavatam, then we'll just have a roller coaster of emotions. So thank you, everyone, for patiently listening. There was a few points I wanted to make, but thank you. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hare Bo.